Hello, and welcome to the Gang Culture Podcast, a series educating you about gang culture. This season, we hope to expand on the lived experiences of gang and street life, explore further research surrounding the appeal of gangs, all while bringing together an array of unique voices to inspire, empower, and cause change. Whether you are listening at home, school, or on the way to work, we hope you enjoy and learn something that can be shared with others. Welcome to another episode of Gang Culture. I'm your host, Ellis Rouse, and I'm joined today by special guest, Mark Bucci. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my honor to be here.
So, Mark, could you please introduce yourself and who you are and what you do?
Yep. As you said, my name's Mark Bucci. Mm-hmm. I have recently retired after 41 years of law enforcement service and 23 years military. So, a lot of years doing a lot of fun stuff. But most of my time in law enforcement was spent working with abused and exploited children. And along with that, some undercover work and some, rescue work, kids that were being trafficked, trying to get them up the street.
Wow. So can you discuss your extremely diverse career from law enforcement to social services, and how did your journey start?
Well, at the age of 19, just when I had graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to go into law enforcement, but not for a lot of reasons that people want to go. You lack up bad guys and all that, but, I was more along the lines of trying to heal the communities that were broken, and this is back in the 70s, the mid-70s. So the 60s, in the 1960s, communities were broke because of Vietnam War protests, aggressive law enforcement tactics, and that spilled over into the 70s. But there was a change in law enforcement that began to take root. That change was community policing. It was crime prevention. It was youth work, trying to partner with the community. Being on the tail end of the 60s era, I embraced that new era, the new wave of law enforcement coming. And I wanted to be a part of that. So I went to college, community college, and I spent a couple of semesters. But I realized two things. By the time I would graduate from the community college, I'd still be too young back at that time to be a police officer. Plus, community college was supposed to be cheap. But back then, it wasn't cheap for us. So I figured the military provided training, experience, education, and benefits. And I made that choice to go in the military. It was post-Vietnam, so I didn't have to worry about the draft or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So in working in such an intense and challenging field, what keeps you motivated?
A couple of things. My go-to has always been running, long distance, for 50 years, running. And working out, martial arts. But also the satisfaction of allowing a victim to be able to put their difficulties and tragedies behind them with closure, that they know their offender will no longer hurt anybody. And in essence, gives them the safety that they needed. It's rewarding in that sense. A lot of the cases that I've worked are heartbreaking. Made me a very overprotective parent when my kids were growing up. But that's pretty much my focus of trying to stay sane in an sometimes insane world.
Yeah. With such an extensive background in law enforcement and military service, how have you seen gang activity evolve over the years?
Well, back in my earlier career in the military, now, let me kind of preface that with this. I went in the military in 1976. Spent 4 years active duty. I got out. A friend of mine talked me into going back in the reserves. That was about 1982. And he had joined an organization called the Airforce Office of Special Investigations. That is similar to what everybody knows as NCIS. So the NCIS of the Air Force is the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, AFOSI. So my friend, who was on the police department with me down in Virginia, went back in the reserves and became an agent. So he talked me into doing it, so I did. And I spent about 4 years as a reservist, as a special agent. And then got out because, raising 2 kids, living in the D.C. area, cost of living, both of us had to work. I'm going to school like 3 nights a week, and I'm working shift work on the police department down there. So I separated from the military. About 16 years later, in 2002, I re-enlisted and finished my military career in 2015. So early on, we dealt with teenagers on base that had the same issues of growing up like kids in a regular community. We were dealing with drugs back then on base. Some of the kids involved in that. We were dealing with abuse on base, similar to what happens in the community. And we were dealing with kids that run away, things like that. But it wasn't to the depth that it is now. It's a different culture on a military base. The answer back then for kids that went awry, went astray, or damaged property on base, or were stealing on base, was to kick them off. That was the policy, the regulation. Parents can't control your kids. We're kicking you off. They would kick them out of housing, back to the community. The problem with that, this base that I was on was in Southeast DC. There's no way that these families would survive in a very typical inner city area that was just drowning in poverty, drugs, gangs in the neighborhood, that kind of thing. So we didn't see what I began to see when I went back in the military, with newer generation where they were becoming indoctrinated into different gangs, skinheads, things like that. And it had worried us. We didn't have that experience in the past. Motorcycle gangs, a lot of Vietnam veterans were involved in that when they got out of the military. But that's when they got out. Here we're dealing with, young airmen or soldiers who are still in and becoming involved in these groups. So that's quite a startling contrast.
Yeah. In working with juvenile diversion programs during your time in the Air Force, were a lot of kids involved in street life?
Well, let me ask, when we say street life, what are we including?
Like the crime, the petty crimes, robberies, obviously gun violence.
It was more along the lines of what we call status offenses, running away, cutting school, things that they can't do when they're underage, that they, it's not a crime, but it's, gets them in trouble, that kind of stuff. A lot of that, a lot of typical, petty theft. We didn't experience. It's again, the culture's different, so we didn't experience the deep-seated crime on base. And if it was happening, then the Air Force or whatever military it is would intervene, and deal with it. So it didn't get a chance to get hold so much. But we still had drug dealing, and we still had kids that were involved in that as with like older teenagers or young adults that would have a legal reason to be on base. But we use that opportunity to basically deal to the kids, teenagers. That's always been a problem. And it's a problem, now. It's just the nature of the beast. But, and as I said, the diversion program that we developed back when I was active duty in the 70s was kind of new. It was a new idea that it was an answer to the problem of kicking a family off base because little Johnny stole the bike. The ramifications upon the family for kicking them off base is financial, a huge hit financially, and the stress. And the military member, the father and mother, who was a sergeant or an officer, has to deal with that within their own, command structure of having a troubled child, having to be kicked off base. So it's a stigma upon the military member as well. There's no good reason to use that as a punishment to destroy a family. So we had an opportunity to try to implement a diversion program to have medical people, sociology, social workers, psychiatrists, whatever, teachers, bring all the entities, all the services together to look at this kid and the family to make a better decision than causing a military member who may be very productive and a good troop to fail in his career.
Yeah. In investigating child exploitation and trafficking, have you found any overlap with gang activity?
Statistics say that 30% of trafficked children are controlled by gangs, which is a significant number. And yeah, it's a problem. It's like right in your face, because in the area that I worked, in Delaware County, there are certain towns that were close to the Philly border, so it was easier for a young kid to jump on the trolley or the train and go into Philly, and that's what was happening. The gangs that influence the teenagers within their communities is part of the prior speaker that you had, where she was saying with gun violence. It all goes together. You know, we had I won't say that they were Bloods and Crips from New York that, had taken root here, but we had young people identifying with it as Bloods or Crips. They had their own tags. They had their own areas to hang out and control. So the outlaw gang mentality is sort of very much in our community, as it is in many others. And comes with that is young girls being trafficked, mostly females. And absolutely, there's a nexus between the two.
Yeah. And that was my next question. What role do gangs play in human trafficking and child exploitation?
Well, ever since the internet took hold and computers became the big thing, everybody had to have a computer. So we saw, child exploitation and child trafficking exponentially, increase. But when cell phones hit, the gloves came off. It was just crazy. Mm-hmm. Still is. Back before the cell phones were a big thing, I mean, you're not going to take your computer under your arm and, but now all you got to do is take your phone, put it in your pocket. It is the technology has allowed for not only criminal gangs to network broader than we've ever seen before, but given young people an opportunity, unfortunately, to step out on their own, to use various social platforms to put themselves out there, mm-hmm. to traffic themselves. And what happens is it ends up turning into them being part of a group or part of a gang, mm-hmm. or pimp, or as we call a bottom, who's the woman or the man who is running the show, drawing the kids in, drawing the women in. And we've seen it a lot, even just in our county. So yeah, it's the technology itself has given them an edge against us.
Yeah. How do they operate differently than other types of organized crime?
Well, they really don't. they'll most of the gangs that I'm aware of, where young people and guns are involved, and trafficking, pretty much set their own pace. The syndicate type of gangs, the mafia, and there's Latino, mafia. There's Asian mafia. There's very specific structure, if you will. With these guys, it's like a homemade, structure that they may get ideas from other organizations or other people. Certainly, the younger teenagers are being shepherded and guided by older teenagers and young adults. Definitely the 20s, guys in their 20s. And no, they structure it the way they see they can make money. And they incorporate the gun and the drugs to be able to support their, if you will, organization. It's very effective. It's very violent. And but they fail. A lot of times they do fail. Just law enforcement's on their neck a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about how telephones and social media and phones have changed things. So how have online communications and the ability to be anonymous empowered gangs to expand illegal activity?
Exponentially. I mean, it's like blowing up a balloon. The more effort you put into it, the bigger the balloon's going to get. And the more power you give people who are looking for power and money, it's going to feed it. Online communication and digital anonymity or anonymous operating anonymously in the World Wide Web environment is a challenge for us. And us, I mean government, law enforcement. So even though I'm retired, it's still part of me. It's a challenge, really is. And for a while there, we were behind the 8 ball. They were ahead of us. The criminal gangs, even the individuals who were exploiting people, elderly as well, but also children, online. And it organizations or organizations like the FBI, Secret Service, NSA to a degree, some Department of Defense, law enforcement agencies have partnered with state and locals to address the problem, and with great success. But it's not stopping it. We're not stopping it. There's still kids getting hurt. There's still elderly losing their life savings. It's really out of control. But each time we get a case that involves this, there's a lot of services put forth to try to break it down, to try to identify it. Remember, everybody used to get all these emails from Africa, and it went on for a long time, and everybody just ignored it, Some people answered it, but all of a sudden, they finally caught the guys, and took them down. So it took a while,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years, And that's a danger behind anonymous activity like that. And there's somebody making something, creating another program, another app, another trick in the bag, to trying to fool parents or trying to, fool the system, and it's trying to play catch up all the time.
Yeah. From your perspective, what are the most effective strategies to disrupt the trafficking networks run by gangs? Is there a way for local residents to aid this?
I would say that what has been consistently effective is communication, is education. Educate the community with to look for the red flags that just scream out. Trafficking, there's kids being trafficked, or there's gangs that are like every once in a while you read about a neighborhood where the residents just got fed up, and they organized and went after them, and stood their ground. It's difficult, but probably the most important thing is for people to pay attention. You have to pay attention. If there's a house in your neighborhood that seems to have a lot of traffic, young women or teenagers running in and out, and a lot of suspicious activity, do something about it. And I'll share that a little bit later, the case that I had. Case in point.
Yeah. In going to school for criminal justice, did you take any classes that discuss gangs?
Well, yeah, in law enforcement we have to have 40 hours a year of in-service training, and it covers a gamut of subjects in law enforcement. And I know we had one block of training about gangs, tattoos that may be on their hands or their head, their face, whatever, who they are, what they do, where they are, and as far as with towns or with cities, they tend to control or be more prevalent in. And I've had a couple of courses specializing in gang investigations, but that's been a while back. And I was mostly focusing on motorcycle gangs, outlaw motorcycle gangs, because so much has changed with technology that organized criminals they're all over the place. It's like there's no boundaries anymore. It's part of the problem with trafficking as well. There's no boundaries. So somebody will have a girl here who's from California. They'll take a kid from Philly and send him to the West Coast. So it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Did you ever have an undercover investigation that changed the way you view crime and criminal activity?
All I could say is the undercover cases I've had, they're all unique. And the one case that I had that'll drive home the point of people paying attention. Several years ago, there was an organization in the city that nonprofit that was monitoring Backpage, which has now been taken down. And they saw an ad on Backpage, and the person in the ad looked to be 14, 15 years old, and rather explicit. For Backpage, it was not much left there to cover, and so they sent the lead to me, and we looked into it. I tried to make contact with the minor that was in the ad, and I wasn't able to reach her. We were hoping to recover her, and it was in a local community within the county, which was interesting. And this community is a very tight community, just like a typical old town with row houses, all the neighbors are out. And so, long story short, we developed a strategy. And so we reached out to the adult that was taking the calls. And so she answered. And we set up a meet. And we didn't know where they were yet. We knew they were advertising this in town. So she said, well, I'm in this town. So now we know she's in that town, so it's okay. Set up a time. We went out to that town. We had a whole team. We had our narcotics and vice guys. I was the undercover. They wired me up for safety. It wasn't like a wire, like evidence. They just wired me up so they could hear what's going on. And it's kind of comical now. So, wasn't that? So I went to the door, and she invited me in, and we went to the third floor of the house, row house, and all the way to the back. And so I'm in the room with this woman, and she's like, how much, do what, I'm going to, not get into details, because probably you end up getting beeped out. You can just imagine. So, we got, she's like, yeah, it's, so, get comfortable, and nobody's coming to save me. No backup, banging on the door, and I'm like, she's like, come on, time's money, it's good, and I'm untying my shoe, real slow. I double knotted them, and so, I get my one shoe off. I'm like, where are they? What happened? And all of a sudden you hear the bang, bang, bang. Police, they ram the door. And, of course, they come running up, and they lock me up, because make it look good, So I get outside, and I'm like, Lieutenant, what happened? And he said, well, the mic failed. We couldn't hear you. I said, how do you know? How did you know when to commit? He goes, I figured I'd give you enough time.
Wow.
Scary.
Yeah, that is.
In the house were two other people, two men. The main guy, no lie, 6'7", 250 pounds. His hand was humongous. Could have covered my entire face and then some. I mean, if I had to fight this guy, I figured just run between his legs, dive down the stairs.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow.
It was crazy.
I have a final question for you, Mark.
Yes, sir.
What advice would you give to young people or those considering a career in law enforcement, social services, or private investigator?
choose carefully. These are great careers. Just know what you're getting into. Education. Get your education. Keep an open mind. And do what's right.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that insight and all the work that you've done, and helping our community to be a better place.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you found this episode informative. I look forward to continuing the conversation next week on gang culture. Stay tuned as we dive into an enlightening conversation with our guests.